They say power corrupts. But what if power doesn't just corrupt? What if it demands something far more deliberate? What if ascending to the heights of influence, wealth, and control requires more than ambition and luck? What if it requires sacrifice? Not the sacrifice of comfort or time. Something older. Something that echoes through torchlit chambers and behind locked doors where the uninitiated are never allowed to enter. Rituals. Ancient, symbolic, psychological acts that bind individuals to something larger than themselves and smaller than humanity. This is a story of how the global elite maintain their power not through force or even money alone, but through ceremonies that would seem absurd to outsiders, yet are treated with deadly seriousness by those who participate. This is about the price they pay, the oaths they take, and the traditions they preserve in an age that claims to have outgrown superstition. Welcome to the hidden architecture of power, where psychology meets tradition, where symbolism becomes reality, and where fear is a currency that keeps everyone in line. To understand what happens in the boardrooms and private estates of today's elite, we need to go back, way back, to a time when power was openly ritualistic, when kings claimed divine right, and when secret knowledge was the ultimate form of control. Ancient Egypt. The priests of the mystery schools didn't just lead religious ceremonies. They controlled the entire infrastructure of power. Pharaohs were crowned in elaborate rituals that lasted days, involving purification, symbolic death and rebirth, and oaths sworn before gods that the common people never saw. These weren't mere performances. They were psychological technologies designed to transform an individual's identity. When you participate in a ritual, something changes in your brain. Neuroscience has confirmed what mystics knew millennia ago. Ceremonial acts, especially those involving sensory deprivation, repetition, symbolic gestures, and group participation, actually rewire neural pathways. They create what psychologists call transformative experiences, moments where your sense of self is fundamentally altered. The mystery schools of Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Orphic traditions, required initiates to undergo experiences so profound that speaking of them to outsiders was punishable by death, not because the knowledge itself was dangerous, but because the experience couldn't be transmitted through words. It had to be lived, and once lived, it bound you to a community of fellow initiates who shared something the rest of humanity could never understand. This is the first principle of elite rituals. Exclusivity creates loyalty. Move forward to medieval Europe. The Knights Templar, one of history's most powerful organizations, maintained their cohesion through initiation ceremonies that involved symbolic kisses, oaths of poverty and obedience, and rituals that scandalized their enemies. Were they worshipping demons, as their accusers claimed? Probably not. But they were definitely doing something that made them feel separate from ordinary Christians, something that bonded them more tightly than any contract could. The Freemasons codified this principle into a system that spread across the globe. Their lodges required elaborate initiation rites, blindfolds, symbolic ropes, stage dramas of death and resurrection. Why? Because shared secrets create impenetrable bonds. When you've been vulnerable together, when you participated in something that would look ridiculous or even disturbing to outsiders, you're tied to your fellow participants in ways that rational self-interest alone could never achieve. George Washington was a Mason. So were Benjamin Franklin, Winston Churchill, and countless other architects of the modern world. Were they planning world domination in their lodge meetings? Probably not. But they were building networks of trust that transcended normal social boundaries, creating webs of mutual obligation that could be activated when needed. This is the second principle. Ritual creates obligation beyond law. Now here's what most people miss. These weren't primitive societies engaging in superstition. These were often the most educated, most sophisticated people of their time. They knew these rituals were symbolic, but they also knew that symbols have power precisely because humans are symbolic creatures. We don't live in reality. We live in interpretive reality, in meaning-making reality. And rituals are meaning-making machines. When a CEO rings a bell to open the stock market, it's a ritual. When a president places their hand on a Bible and recites an oath, it's a ritual. When graduates throw caps into the air, it's a ritual. We accept these as normal because they're public and their symbolism is transparent. But what about the rituals that aren't public? What about the ceremonies that the most powerful people on earth participate in, away from cameras, away from the judgment of the masses who might not understand. Those rituals still exist. They've adapted, evolved, and in some ways become even more sophisticated, because the people performing them understand something fundamental. You can't maintain power over long periods through coercion alone. You need belief. You need identity. You need a sense of being special, chosen, different from the ordinary run of humanity. And nothing creates that sense quite like a well-designed ritual. Let's talk about Bohemian Grove. Every summer, in a redwood forest north of San Francisco, approximately 2,000 of the world's most powerful men gather for 2 weeks. Presidents, prime ministers, corporate titans, media moguls, military leaders. No women are allowed. No electronics. No outsiders. Just the members and their carefully vetted guests. What happens there? They perform a ceremony called the cremation of care. Participants, wearing hooded robes, gather around a giant concrete owl, a 40-foot statue representing wisdom or, in some interpretations, Moloch, an ancient deity associated with child sacrifice. They conduct a ritual where an effigy symbolizing care or worry is burned, accompanied by elaborate staging, music, and pageantry. When this was first revealed to the public through leaked footage and testimonies, the reaction was predictable. Conspiracy theories exploded. Satanic rituals. Human sacrifice. Devil worship. But here's what's actually more disturbing than any satanic conspiracy. These people, among the most rational, data-driven, scientifically minded individuals on the planet, choose to spend their precious leisure time participating in a mock druidic ceremony in front of a giant owl. Why? Because it works. Not in a magical sense. In a psychological sense. These rituals serve multiple functions that are crucial to maintaining elite cohesion. First, boundary maintenance. By requiring participation in something that would seem absurd or disturbing to outsiders, you create a clear division between the initiated and the uninitiated. If you're willing to stand in robes and chant before a giant owl, you've proven you're committed to the group. You've paid an admission price in the currency of dignity. Second, vulnerability bonding. When powerful people do something that could be embarrassing or damaging if revealed, they create mutual vulnerability. Everyone has something on everyone else. This isn't blackmail in the traditional sense. It's mutual insurance. No one can expose the group without exposing themselves. Third, identity transformation. When you participate in ritual, especially repeated ritual, you begin to internalize the identity it represents. You're not just a businessman anymore. You're a member of an ancient tradition. You're part of something that transcends quarterly earnings and election cycles. But Bohemian Grove is just the most visible example. Let's look at how ritual pervades elite institutions in ways most people never recognize. Consider Skull and Bones at Yale University. Founded in 1832, the secret society has produced 3 presidents, countless senators, Supreme Court justices, and CIA operatives. Their initiation ritual, revealed through various exposés, involves lying in a coffin while recounting your sexual history, kissing a skull believed to be Geronimo's, and taking new names that fellow members will use for life. Absurd? Absolutely. Effective? Undeniably. Because 20 years later, when a Skull and Bones member from the class of 2000 encounters a member from the class of 1985 in a position of power, there's an instant connection. They've shared an experience so bizarre, so intimate, so specific that it creates a bond stronger than friendship. They owe each other something ineffable but real. This is how power networks are built. Not through conspiracy and smoke-filled rooms, but through shared experiences that create tribal loyalty stronger than ideology, stronger than national allegiance, stronger than almost anything except perhaps family. And even then, look at elite boarding schools. Phillips Exeter, Eton, Little Rosie, the hazing, the traditions, the peculiar rituals that outsiders find either charming or disturbing, the secret societies within those schools, the ceremonies that mark transitions from one grade to another. These aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They're designed to create a sense of being part of a select group, of having gone through something that marks you as different. Corporate culture has adopted these principles with remarkable sophistication. Google's elaborate hiring process isn't just about finding qualified candidates. It's a ritual of belonging. The multiple rounds of interviews, The famous questions designed to test lateral thinking, the careful cultural fit assessments. By the time you're hired, you've been initiated. You've proven you're one of them. McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, elite law firms, they all have variations of the same pattern. Brutal work hours aren't just about productivity. They're about sacrifice. They're about proving your commitment. They're about creating a shared experience of suffering that bonds a surviving cohort together. The political world operates similarly. Think about the oath of office. On the surface, it's a simple legal formality, but watch how it's performed. The staging, the witnesses, the hand on the Bible or other sacred text, the prescribed words that must be spoken exactly. This is ritual, and it transforms the person speaking it, not through magic, but through the weight of witness commitment, through the psychological power of public transformation. Intelligence agencies take this further. The clearance process for top-secret classifications involves not just background checks but psychological evaluations, polygraph tests that ask deeply personal questions, and understand that you are now bound by oaths that supersede normal morality. You can lie to your family. You can deceive your friends, because you've been initiated into something larger, something more important. When whistleblowers emerge from these systems, they often describe the psychological difficulty not just of risking prosecution, but of violating the oath. Even when they believe the institution is acting wrongly, breaking that ritual commitment creates genuine psychological distress. This is the power of ritual. It reaches deeper than logic. Now, let's talk about the Davos World Economic Forum. Every January, the global elite converge on a Swiss mountain town. On the surface, it's a conference. But look closer at the structure. The concentric circles of access, public events, closed sessions, private dinners, and the innermost gatherings that don't appear on any schedule. The badges that indicate your level, determining which rooms you can enter, which people you can approach. This is medieval court hierarchy translated into modern form. And at the center of it, away from any publicity, the real elite participate in their own rituals. Not robes and chanting. That would be too obvious. Instead, it's a ritual of consensus building, the ceremony of the shared understanding, the unspoken agreements that never appear in writing. When they leave Davos, they don't leave with contracts. They leave with alignment. They participated in the ritual of being important together, of sharing concerns that the masses couldn't understand, of making decisions that will affect billions while feeling the weight of that responsibility in the thin mountain air. Surrounded by peers who understand. This is ritual for the rational age, stripped of obvious symbolism but no less powerful for it. Now we come to the crucial question. Why? These are people who have access to the best education, the finest advisors, the most sophisticated understanding of psychology and human behavior. Why do they continue to participate in rituals that, if examined rationally, often seem absurd? The answer is complex and reveals something profound about human nature and the unique challenges of maintaining power. Let's start with the problem of trust at the top. When you have significant power, everyone wants something from you. Every interaction is potentially transactional. Every friendship might be strategic. Every confidence could be leveraged. You exist in a state of permanent suspicion, where genuine human connection becomes nearly impossible, except with fellow initiates. When you participated in a ritual together, especially one that involved vulnerability or potential embarrassment, you've created a space outside normal social calculation. You've demonstrated that you value membership in this group more than you fear looking foolish. That's a powerful signal. Intelligence agencies have known this for centuries. It's why spy networks often involve ceremonial elements in recruitment. Once someone has participated in a secret ritual, they've crossed a threshold. They can't uncross it. They're in. And being in means they can be trusted in ways that sign contracts and rational incentives can never guarantee. The second reason is identity reinforcement. Power is precarious. Empires fall. Fortunes evaporate. Political careers end. The elite exist in a constant state of anxiety about maintaining their position. Rituals serve as regular reminders that they're part of something larger and more enduring than any individual fortune or position. When a new member is inducted into an elite society, they're not just joining an organization. They're connecting to a lineage. This ritual was performed by so-and-so in 1950 and by so-and-so in 1920, and it connects back to traditions that are centuries or even millennia old. Suddenly, you're not just a wealthy person or a powerful politician. You're part of an eternal order. This provides psychological stability in an unstable world. Markets crash, but the society endures. Governments fall, but the lodge remains. Your individual power might wane, but you're always part of the elect. Third, control through revelation. Here's a sophisticated mechanism that many people miss. Elite rituals often involve progressive revelation. The deeper you go, the more you learn. Mystery schools operated on this principle. You'd be initiated into outer mysteries, then inner mysteries, then secret mysteries available only to the most committed members. This creates a powerful incentive structure. You're always moving toward the next level, always believing that just beyond where you currently are, there's deeper knowledge, greater power, more significant secrets. This keeps members engaged and obedient. You don't want to risk exclusion when you're so close to the next revelation. Modern elite institutions use this brilliantly. The junior partner believes the senior partners know something they don't. The senior partners believe the board members have access to deeper knowledge. The board members believe there's an inner circle with the real information. And everyone keeps performing their role, keeps following the rules, keeps maintaining the system, because they believe they're working toward eventual admission to the innermost sanctum. But here's the secret. Often there is no innermost sanctum. Or if there is, it contains nothing more profound than what's at the previous levels. The structure itself is a control mechanism. The belief in hierarchical knowledge is more powerful than the knowledge itself. Fourth, the management of guilt. Let's be direct. Maintaining significant power in a world of vast inequality requires either sociopathy or psychological mechanisms that allow you to live with the contradiction. Most elite individuals aren't sociopaths. They're humans who love their children, care about their friends, and have some level of conscience. Rituals help manage this cognitive dissonance. When you participate in ceremonies that mark you as special, chosen, part and elect, it becomes easy to justify your position. You're not just lucky or ruthless, you're selected. The ritual proves it. You underwent the initiation. You earned your place through something more than mere wealth or connections. This is why many elite rituals involve elements of ordeal or sacrifice. You had to endure something. You had to prove yourself. Therefore, your position is legitimate. The private school hazing, the brutal associate years of the law firm, the initiation ceremony that tested your commitment. These create a narrative where your privilege was earned, not inherited or seized. It's a sophisticated form of self-justification. And it works. Fifth, the weaponization of the absurd. Here's a subtle but brilliant aspect of elite ritual. The more absurd it is, the better it works as a filter and a bond. If initiation into an elite society involved simply signing a membership agreement and paying dues, it would attract anyone with money. But if it requires standing in a cemetery at midnight, reciting nonsense syllables, and pretending to summon ancient spirits, it filters for a particular type of person. Someone who values membership enough to temporarily suspend their dignity. This is actually a feature, not a bug. Secret societies deliberately incorporate absurd elements because they're testing something crucial. Are you willing to look ridiculous to be one of us? If yes, then you're truly committed. If no, then you don't value membership highly enough. The absurdity also serves another function. It makes the whole thing harder to expose. If a member were to reveal the rituals, they'd have to describe themselves participating in something that sounds insane. This creates a natural barrier to exposure. You're not just breaking an oath. You're admitting you stood around in robes chanting a now. Most people, when faced with that choice, stay silent. Sixth, the creation of altered states. Modern neuroscience has revealed something that mystics always knew. Ritual can induce altered states of consciousness that feel profound and meaningful regardless of the ritual's content. The combination of repetitive actions, unusual settings, sensory manipulation, darkness, candlelight, incense chanting, and emotional intensity creates genuine neurological changes. Your brain releases different chemicals. Your sense of self becomes more fluid. You feel connected to something larger than yourself. These aren't fake experiences. They're real neurological events, and they're powerful. People who undergo intense ritual experiences often describe them as among the most meaningful moments of their lives, even if they logically recognize the ritual's constructed nature. Elite rituals are designed by people who understand this. The robes aren't just for show. They create anonymity and uniformity, dissolving individual identity. The candlelight isn't just atmospheric. It engages different neural pathways in electric light. The prescribed movements and words aren't just tradition. They're hypnotic techniques that bypass rational analysis. When a ritual is well designed, participants experience genuine transcendence. And that experience bonds them to the practice and to each other in ways that survive any amount of subsequent rational analysis. Seventh, the maintenance of hierarchy. Every healthy power structure requires clear hierarchies that everyone accepts as legitimate. But in modern democratic societies, explicit hierarchy is uncomfortable. We're supposed to believe in equality, merit, opportunity for all. Rituals provide a solution. They create informal hierarchies that feel natural and earned rather than imposed. The person who's been through more initiations, who knows more rituals, who's been admitted to inner circles, they have obvious seniority that doesn't need to be justified through titles or wealth. They simply know more. They've been deeper. They're further along the path. This creates a self-regulating system where younger members defer to older members not because of explicit commands, but because of ritualized authority. The older member has been where you're going. They've survived ordeals you haven't faced yet. Their guidance feels legitimate because it's earned through shared experience, not merely claimed through position. Eighth, the control of ambition. Here's a paradox. Elite institutions need ambitious people, but unbridled ambition is dangerous to stable hierarchies. Rituals solve this by creating progressive levels of initiation, by requiring patience and obedience to advance, by making the path to power involve submission to tradition. Rituals channel ambition into acceptable forms. You can't seize power in a ritual system. You can only earn it by following prescribed path. The most ambitious person still has to wait their turn, perform the required ceremonies, demonstrate their commitment over time. This prevents the constant coup attempts and backstabbing that would otherwise characterize elite institutions. Look at how the Catholic Church maintained stability for centuries. Through ritualized advancement, you couldn't just declare yourself pope. You had to move through the hierarchy: priest, bishop, cardinal. Each level required ceremonies, odes, demonstrations of orthodoxy. By the time you reached the top, you've been so thoroughly shaped by the system that you were unlikely to threaten it. Modern elite institutions operate similarly, just with different symbolism. Finally, the perpetuation of mystery. Power is most effective when it's partially hidden. Complete transparency makes power vulnerable to challenge. But obvious secrecy invites rebellion. The solution is strategic mystery. Rituals are perfect for this. They hint at deeper knowledge without fully revealing it. They suggest profound truths without explicitly stating them. They create an aura of significance that can't be easily punctured because it's never quite clear what the significance is. When outsiders see footage of robed figures performing ceremonies, they fill in the blanks with their own fears and fantasies. Satanism, world domination, ancient evil, and while the reality is usually more mundane, the mystery serves the elite's purposes better than the truth would. Because the truth is often banal. These are humans using psychological tools to maintain group cohesion and personal identity in the face of the unique pressures of power. But that truth isn't scary. Mystery is scarier. And fear, even irrational fear, is a form of power. So far, I've been relatively measured in describing elite rituals as primarily psychological tools. But we need to address the uncomfortable question. What happens when rituals stop being merely symbolic? History provides disturbing answers. The Aztec elite performed human sacrifices. The Roman emperors engaged in practices that still horrify us. Medieval nobility participated in witch hunts and torture. Were these just symbolic rituals that got out of hand, or was something darker at play? Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you create a system where people believe they're fundamentally different from ordinary humans, where they're above normal moral constraints, where their power depends on maintaining separation from the masses, then the line between symbolic sacrifice and literal sacrifice can blur. I'm not suggesting that modern elites are committing mass murder in secret ceremonies, but I am suggesting that ritual systems designed to create moral distance between the elite and everyone else can facilitate moral atrocities. Consider the well-documented case of Jeffrey Epstein. His island wasn't just a place for criminal activity. It was ritualized. The temple structure, the specific routines, the initiation of powerful people into illegal acts. This wasn't just about satisfying desires. It was about creating bonds through shared transgression, about using ritual to normalize the abnormal. When you participated in something forbidden together, you're bound together in a specific way. You can't expose others without exposing yourself. And the more forbidden the act, the stronger the bond. This is ritual at its darkest, using transgression itself as a bonding mechanism. Throughout history, elite societies have occasionally been accused of this. The Knights Templar were accused of obscene rituals. The Hellfire Club in 18th century England was said to engage in satanic practices and orgies. The Freemasons have faced endless accusations of occult activities. Most of these accusations were probably exaggerated or false, but some weren't. Some elite groups have used forbidden acts as initiation precisely because they create unbreakable bonds. The psychological principle is sound. If you want to ensure absolute loyalty, have members commit acts they can never admit to. Then they're bound to the group forever, because leaving means either lying about their past or confessing to atrocities. This is where ritual transforms from social technology into control mechanism. And here's what's most disturbing. The participants often don't see themselves as evil. They see themselves as special, as beyond conventional morality, as serving some higher purpose that justifies extraordinary means. When you've been through years of rituals teaching you that you're different, that you're chosen, that normal rules don't apply to you, then acts that would horrify ordinary people can seem justified. The ritual framework has prepared your psychology to accept what you might otherwise reject. This is why ritual can be dangerous. It's not just about building community and identity. It's about shaping what you believe is acceptable. Intelligence agencies understand this explicitly. MKUltra, the CIA's mind control experiments, involve using ritual and repetition to break down individuals' moral frameworks and rebuild them. Torture programs have used ritualized abuse to create compliance. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented historical facts. The elite have access to sophisticated understanding of how ritual and trauma can shape human consciousness. And sometimes that knowledge is weaponized. Now, let's talk about something even more controversial. Do some elite groups actually believe in the supernatural? The rational mind wants to dismiss this. These are educated people, scientifically literate, technologically sophisticated. Surely they don't actually believe in magic or demons or ancient gods. But here's the thing, belief is complicated. You can intellectually know something is symbolic while emotionally experiencing it as real. You can understand that a ritual is theatrical while still feeling genuine transcendence during it. You can recognize that spirits aren't literal entities while treating them as useful psychological constructs. Some elite practitioners of ritual magic, and they do exist in surprising numbers, would describe it not as supernatural but as applied psychology. They're not summoning demons. They're accessing archetypal forces in their own unconscious. They're not performing magic. They're using ritual to focus intention and activate neural pathways that normal consciousness can't easily access. But functionally, this distinction might not matter. If you perform rituals designed to invoke entities, and you experience those entities as real during the ritual, and you make decisions based on what those entities seem to communicate, then for all practical purposes, you believe. And power often attracts people who are comfortable with ambiguity, who can hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously, who can be both rational and mystical depending on the context. Look at the number of elite figures who consult astrologers, employ feng shui masters, or follow numerological principles in business decisions. Ronald and Nancy Reagan famously consulted astrologers on major decisions. Countless CEOs have admitted to using various forms of divination or ritual to guide choices. Are they deluded? Maybe. Or maybe they've discovered that decision-making under uncertainty benefits from frameworks that access intuition in ways that pure logic can't. Maybe ritual provides what psychologists call decision hygiene, a way of stepping outside your normal thought patterns to gain new perspectives. The danger comes when ritual becomes prescriptive rather than descriptive, when instead of using ritual to access intuition, you start believing the ritual reveals objective truth, when you start making decisions that harm others because the ritual told you to. And this has happened. Religious violence throughout history has often been ritualized violence. The genocide in Rwanda involved ritual elements. Terrorist groups use ritual to prepare members for suicide attacks. When ritual convinces you that you're acting on behalf of forces larger than yourself, it can overcome normal human reluctance to harm others. So when we think about elite rituals, we need to hold two thoughts simultaneously. They're mostly psychological tools for group cohesion, but they're also potentially frameworks for justifying atrocity. The question isn't whether elite groups perform rituals. They clearly do. The question is, what prevents those rituals from sliding into justification for harmful acts? The answer, historically, has been not much. Accountability is the only real safeguard. When elite groups operate in complete secrecy, with no outside oversight, no transparency, no accountability, then ritual can facilitate any behavior the group decides is justified. This is why secret societies are genuinely concerning, not because they're necessarily doing evil things, but because the structure itself removes the normal social constraints that prevent evil things. Let's shift perspective now. Instead of observing from outside, let's try to understand what these rituals feel like from inside. Because judging without understanding is easy. Understanding requires empathy, even for people whose behavior we might find disturbing. Imagine you're a young person born into significant wealth or power. From birth, you're treated differently. People defer to you. Your choices have unusual weight. Your family name opens doors that others can't even approach. But you're also isolated. Your peers aren't really peers. They're positioned relative to your family's power. You can never be sure people like you or what you represent. Trust becomes complicated. Friendship becomes strategic, even when you don't want it to be. Then you're sent to an elite institution, a boarding school, a university with exclusive societies, a family business with its own traditions. And there you encounter ritual. At first, it might seem silly. Robes, ceremonies, prescribed words. But then you participate, and something unexpected happens. For the first time, you're genuinely equal to others in the room. Everyone is wearing the same robe. Everyone is speaking the same words. Everyone is undergoing the same ordeal. Your family name doesn't matter in this moment. Your wealth doesn't matter. What matters is your commitment to the shared experience. This is profoundly relieving. For once, you're not being evaluated based on your external markers of status. You're being evaluated based on your willingness to participate, to be vulnerable, to share something authentic with others who are equally vulnerable. And the ritual creates a space where that vulnerability is safe. Because everyone in the room has agreed to the same rules, taken the same oaths, accepted the same boundaries. Within this ritual space, trust is possible in a way it isn't in the outside world. So you continue. You advance through degrees or levels. Each one requires something of you: memorization, performance, demonstration, commitment. And each one brings you closer to others who've made the same journey. Years later, when you're in a position of genuine power, you remember those experiences. You remember feeling connected to something larger than your individual ambition. You remember the sense of belonging that had nothing to do with wealth or status and everything to do with shared initiation. And when you encounter another initiate, there's instant recognition. You've both been through the same transformation. You share a language, a set of references, an understanding that doesn't need to be spoken. This creates loyalty that business relationships alone could never generate. Now, from inside this experience, the ritual doesn't seem strange. It seems like the most natural thing in the world. Of course you need shared symbols and ceremonies. Of course you need boundaries between initiated and uninitiated. Of course you need progressive revelation and hierarchical knowledge. Because without it, you'd be drowning in a sea of transaction and suspicion. The ritual provides structure, meaning, and connection in a world that otherwise reduces everything to power dynamics and calculation. But here's where it gets complicated. This same framework that provides meaning can also provide justification. Let's say your initiated group needs to make a decision that will harm outsiders. Maybe it's a business deal that will devastate a community. Maybe it's a political policy that will benefit the elite at the expense of the masses. Maybe it's something darker. Within the ritual framework, this decision can be framed not as selfishness or cruelty, but as necessity. We're the guardians of the system. We understand things the uninitiated can't. We have to make hard choices for the greater good. This is the burden of our position. The ritual has already established that you're different, that you have access to knowledge others don't, that you're part of something larger than individual morality. So when the group decides something that would otherwise seem wrong, the ritual framework makes it feel right. This is how good people participate in bad systems, not because they're evil, but because they've been psychologically prepared by ritual to accept that their group's decisions are legitimate, even when those decisions harm others. From inside, it doesn't feel like corruption. It feels like responsibility. It doesn't feel like conspiracy. It feels like burden of leadership. The ritual has done its work. It's created a psychological framework where elite interests feel like universal interests, where maintaining power feels like maintaining order, where excluding others feels like protecting sacred knowledge. And because you've been through the initiations, because you've earned your place through ritual ordeal, because you've sacrificed your ego and your privacy and your comfort to join this group, questioning it feels like betraying everything you become. This is the true price of power, not what you pay to get it, but what you become to keep it. We've traveled deep into the ritualized world of the global elite. We've seen how ancient practices persist in modern forms. We've understood the psychological mechanisms that make ritual so effective at building loyalty and shaping identity. We've glimpsed the darker possibilities when ritual facilitates transgression. Now we come to the final question. What does all this mean? To the uninitiated, elite rituals seem like madness. Grown adults, highly educated and successful, standing in robes and performing ceremonies that would look absurd if filmed and broadcast. Powerful people consulting astrologers and engaging in symbolic acts that have no rational justification. But to the initiated, this is order. This is how power has always been maintained. This is how trust is built in high-stakes environments. This is how identity is formed and preserved across generations. This is how the chaos of ambition and competition is channeled into stable hierarchies. Both perspectives are true. The rituals are absurd, judged by purely rational standards. But they're also functional, judged by the needs of power maintenance. They're psychologically sophisticated tools dressed in archaic symbolism. What we're really looking at is a fundamental tension in human nature. We're rational creatures who need irrational frameworks to function. We make decisions based on logic, but we need meaning to sustain motivation. We organize through explicit rules, but we bond through shared mystery. Elite rituals are simply the clearest expression of this tension. They're what happens when the people with the most power and education and resources apply sophisticated understanding to the ancient human need for belonging and transcendence. The question for the rest of us is, should we be concerned? The answer is complex. On one hand, every human community uses rituals. Families have traditions. Nations have ceremonies. Religions have practices. Rituals themselves aren't inherently problematic. They're how humans create meaning and connection. On the other hand, when rituals are used to maintain extreme power inequality, when they facilitate decisions that harm the powerless, when they create psychological frameworks that justify atrocity, then yes, we should be very concerned. The problem isn't that the elite perform rituals. The problem is that those rituals often serve to insulate them from accountability, to create moral distance from the consequences of their decisions, to build exclusive networks that extract wealth and power from the broader society. Transparency is the antidote, not complete transparency. Some privacy and confidentiality are necessary for any healthy institution, but enough transparency to ensure accountability. When elite groups can operate in complete secrecy, when their rituals and decisions are entirely hidden from public scrutiny, when there's no mechanism for challenging their consensus, then ritual becomes a tool of oppression rather than community building. The solution isn't to eliminate elite rituals. That's probably impossible and maybe not even desirable. The solution is to ensure that whatever decisions emerge from those ritualized spaces are subject to democratic accountability, legal constraint, and moral scrutiny. Ritual can create profound experiences and genuine community, but it can also create echo chambers where elite consensus becomes disconnected from reality, where power perpetuates itself without regard for its effects on others. The price of power shouldn't be borne only by those who seek it. Too often, it's borne by everyone else. So as we conclude this journey into the hidden architecture of elite power, we're left with a challenge. How we preserve the legitimate human needs that ritual serves for meaning, connection, transcendence, belonging, while preventing ritual from becoming a mechanism for maintaining unjust power structures. How do we allow people to form deep bonds and shared identities without those bonds excluding everyone else from justice and opportunity? How do we honor the psychological truth that humans need mystery and ceremony, while insisting on transparency and accountability, where those ceremonies intersect with power over others? If you want answers to this, kindly hit the subscribe button to see more of this in-depth, insightful stories.